welcome back to MTRA Bedtime Stories. We are now headed into Chapter 13 of Walter Farley's The Black Stallion. My special guest tonight is Bubba, if I can get him out of the hay, because he just loved the hay so much. Hi, buddy. Good boy. He's going to enjoy this chapter. Chapter 13, Night Ride. Alec glanced at his wristwatch as he hurried away from the still dark house where his mother and father were sleeping. 1 o'clock. It was 2 weeks since they had broken the black to bridle and saddle. The full moon was high overhead, the stars were out, a warm spring breeze blew against his face. Henry would be waiting. He reached the gate and let himself in. The truck Henry had borrowed was standing beside the barn. Henry was leaning against it. "Everything all set, Henry?" Alec whispered. "All set," came the quiet answer. He opened the barn door carefully so as not to make any noise. "Don't put on the light," he said over his shoulder as Alex followed him inside. The black neighed, and when he heard them, old Napoleon stuck his head out of his stall and neighed too. "Shh," said Alec and Henry together. "Get over there and quiet them," Henry said. "I'll get the tack." Alec put a hand on each of their noses. "Take it easy, boys," he said. "We don't want to wake anyone up, you know." The horses recognized him now in the moonlight. The black tossed his head gently. Napoleon brushed his long tongue around the boy's hand. Henry returned carrying the bridle and saddle. "Okay," he said, "bring him out." Alec led the black out of his stall without removing his blanket. The stallion stepped skittishly, his hoofs shaking the barn floor. "Hey, Alec," Henry cautioned, "try to get him to stand still. He's gonna wake the missus, sure as shooting." "I'll try, Henry," the boy whispered. "He seems pretty nervous, though. Guess he isn't used to being awakened in the middle of the night." The black looked at Napoleon and whinnied as Alec led him toward the barn door. Then Henry closed the door behind him. Suddenly, Napoleon neighed inside the barn, louder than either of them had ever heard him before. "Jumpin' Jehoshaphat," said Henry as he ran toward the barn. "We'll never get out of here without waking someone up." The black raised his head high in the air, his ears pitched forward, and he answered Napoleon's call. Alec looked at him, then at the barn. "Henry," he said. "Yeah, I've got an idea. Why not take Napoleon with us? The two of them can fit into the truck, and I have a feeling it'll make the black a lot easier to handle, besides being a lot quieter." Henry looked thoughtfully at the restless stallion. "Okay," he finally said. "It's worth trying." A minute later, he led Napoleon toward the truck. The black neighed softly when he saw him, and Alec had no trouble getting him up the ramp into the truck. Henry followed with Napoleon. "Now," said Henry, "we not only have to get this moving van back to the guy I borrowed it from before 6, but we have to get Napoleon back to Tony as well." "It's only 1:30 now," Alex said. "We have to be over there by 2, Henry climbed into the driver's seat, and Alec sat beside him. A minute later, the truck was moving down the driveway. Only the sound of hoofs came from back of the van. Henry drove rapidly through the darkened streets, and a half an hour later, they pulled up in front of a high iron gate. He touched the horn lightly twice. Over the gate, Alec made out the name Belmont. A glimpse of white caught his eye. 2 hands grasped the bars, and a head topped with snow-white hair peered through. "That you, Henry?" an aged, high-pitched voice asked. Henry leaned forward over the side of the car. "Yeah, Jake, it's me," he answered softly. "Everything's okay." "Okay," came the answer. Alec heard the rattle of keys and the turning of the lock. A moment later, the gate swung open. Henry pulled the car in gear and drove through. The gate was closed behind him. Henry didn't stop. He drove as if he knew his way around. "Who was that, Henry?" Alec asked. Henry kept his eyes on the gravel road in front of him, but Alec noticed a slight smile on his lips. "That's Jake," he answered. "We've been pals from way back. In fact," he grinned, "Jake Jake taught me to ride. I was just a kid who loved horses, and I wanted to ride, but I never had even been on a horse. I used to go around and watch the early morning workouts, dreaming of the day when I'd be out there on some thoroughbred. Jake was a well-known jockey then, and I guess I sort of idolized him. But then all the kids did. Well, I guess Jake took me in hand just because he couldn't get rid of me. Anyway, he taught me most everything I know. And if I've ever been a success, he's the reason for it. Jake later went into training horses, and now he's sort of, well, retired, I guess you could call it. Henry paused as he carefully turned a corner, then he continued. You know, Alec, horses are kind of like the sea. You'll find out once you get used to them and learn to love them, you can't ever give them up. That's Jake, and that's me. Jake's only the watchman around here now, but he loves it. There are horses training around here most of the year, and the track will be opening up pretty soon, so he's content. Henry brought the truck to a stop beside the truck. Are you sure there's no one around, Henry? Alec asked. Sure, answered Henry. There are only a few horses in training, and Jake's keeping an eye on them, so we practically have the place to ourselves. Henry had pulled up beside an uploading ramp, and they jumped out and went around to open the back door. The horses whinnied as Alec climbed in beside them. The stallion threw back his head and tried to break free. Alec grasped him by the halter. Whoa, fella, take it easy, he said. He backed the black out onto the ramp and then down to the ground. Henry followed with Napoleon. It'll be a good thing to have Napoleon around where the black can see him, he said. Now you'd better walk the black up and down a few times to get him loosened up. Okay, Alex said. A few minutes later, when he walked the black toward the truck, he heard old Jake's high-pitched voice again and saw the little white-haired man talking to Henry. Be jabbers, Henry, he said. Don't tell me that gray imitation of a horse there is a champion that I'm risking my job for. Henry laughed. Be jabbers yourself, Jake, he said. Don't jump to conclusions so fast. You haven't seen this gray devil run yet. I'm too old a hand around here, my lad, for you to make me believe this critter can do anything but go around that track in a walk. Be jabbers I am, Jake replied. Alec couldn't help laughing. Jake heard him and turned. Then he saw the black and his mouth opened wide. Slowly he walked toward the stallion. The black reared a little, but Alec quieted him down. Jake went around him, his eyes conveying every inch of the black. Henry came up. Well, Jake, he said, after a minute of silence, what do you think of him? Jake looked up at him. You sure were right, Henry. You got a real horse here. Worth risking your job for, Henry smiled. Worth risking my job for, the old man answered, nodding his head. Haven't seen a horse like him, he continued, since Chang. That's just what I told Alec, Henry said. He winked at Alec. Jake, he said, meet the owner of this black stallion, Alec Ramsey. Alec, this is Jake. Alec grasped the old man's hand in a warm clasp and was surprised at the strength in Jake's fingers. Glad to know you, son, Jake said. And I am glad to know you, sir, Alex answered. It was awfully nice of you to let us in here, Henry, and I certainly do appreciate it. Glad to do it, Jake replied. Guess Henry knows my weakness. When he said you had a champion, I had to see for myself. You'll never change, Jake, Henry laughed. Afraid not, the old man grinned. The black tossed his head and the night breeze blew his mane. He's raring to go, Henry, Alex said. Okay, I'll get the saddle. Henry moved toward the truck. Stick around, Jake, he said. Over his shoulder, and you'll see the fastest thing on four legs. Don't worry, I'm not a-going anywhere, Jake answered. Come on, son. He turned to Alec. We'll take him down near the gate. A few minutes later, Henry came up and threw the saddle on the black. The stallion pranced easily, then reared a little when Henry tightened the cinch. Alec and Jake put the bridle on him. All set, Henry said when they had finished. He turned to Alec. Now the idea tonight, kid, he said, is just to get him used to the track. Lucky there's a full moon, so it isn't so dark out there, and I don't think you'll have any trouble seeing. Keep him under control as much as you can. Try not to let him have his head until he's coming down the home stretch. Then, if everything is okay, let him out for a few 100 yards. I've been waiting a long time for this. Before you start, walk him down a ways and back. Got it? Right, answered Alec. Jake was leaning on the fence, his white head against the rail, his eyes on the stallion. He moved slightly, and Alec saw the flash of silver in his hand. He knew Jake held a stopwatch. Henry boosted Alec up on the black's back and adjusted the stirrups. His knees came up, and he squatted on the small racing saddle like a veteran. The stallion moved uneasily. Henry led him out on the track. Okay, son, he said. Walk him down and back first. The black stepped quickly over the soft dirt, his head high, his eyes shifting from side to side. Alec reached over and patted his neck. Take it easy, fella, he murmured. The stallion wanted to run, and Alec had his hands full keeping him to a walk. He went to his first turn and then came back. The night was warm as they approached. Henry, Alec pulled off his sweater. Save this till I come back. He tossed it to Henry and walked the black a few yards past him. Here goes, he said as he whirled the black around. The stallion reared. The boy clung to his neck, his white shirt standing out vividly against the black's body. Then the stallion bolted forward. Alec tightened the reins and held him in. Down the track they streaked, the stallion's giant strides swallowing up the yards. Alec kept high in his stirrups, hung low beside the black's neck. The wind blew in his face and tears streamed down his cheeks. They swung around the first turn and into the backstretch. Alec kept him close to the white fence. He still held the black in, but never before had he gone so fast, except on the island. The stallion loved it and fought for his head. Alec tried frantically to hold him, but halfway down the backstretch he got the bit in his teeth and ripped the reins out of the boy's control. Once again he was wild and free. Alec pulled on the reins with all his might, but the black ran faster and faster. Alec couldn't see anymore. The wind whipped him like a gale, tearing at his shirt. As they rounded the far turn, the boy swayed in the saddle. Instinctively, he clutched the black's long mane and hung on for dear life. The stallion thundered into the home stretch. His legs were pounding the turf. They flashed past Henry and Jake, and then around the first turn. They went again, and once more into the backstretch. Alec was weak from exhaustion. He tried to think. He had to stop the black. He pulled desperately on the reins. But the stallion was once again on his own, running as he had been born to run. It wasn't until they were halfway down the backstretch again that Alec felt the black slow up just a little. Alec spoke into his ear. He loosened one hand from the mane and rubbed the stallion's neck. From then on, his speed lessened gradually, and when they whipped by Henry again, Alec had him almost under control. He managed to slow him down after the first turn and in the backstretch. Alec had at last brought him to a stop. He turned him around. The black whistled and shook his head. He was breathing heavily with a white lather covered his black body. He stepped lightly down the track toward Henry. A few minutes later, Henry and Jake ran up to them. Alec weakly climbed down from the saddle. Henry took the reins. They were sticky and wet with blood. He looked at Alec's bleeding hands and gave the reins to Jake and put an arm around the boy to steady him. Take it easy, son, he said. I'm all right, Henry, Alec said. Just be. After that ride, you should be, Henry said. No one will ever be able to control this horse, Jake said. Once he gets his head, only thing to do is to hang on and wait till he tires. I'll control him one of these days, Alec said determinedly. He felt better now. Strength was returning to his body and the earth was beginning to stand still. The stallion turned his head toward him. His ears pricked forward and he neighed softly. He shoved his nose against the boy. Alec put a hand wrapped in a handkerchief against the soft muzzle. You can't blame him, Henry, he said. It's the first real fun he's had in a long, long time. I've just got to learn to stay on his back and enjoy the ride with him, that's all. Yeah, said Jake, that's all. They walked off the track, Alec leading the black. No one spoke again until they reached the truck. Napoleon stood there tied to the side. He raised his old great head curiously. Alec led the black up to him, and they put their heads together. The stallion obligingly lowered his. Henry turned to Jake. Guess you'll have to admit there isn't a horse in the country that can come close to him, he said. Jake glanced down at the watch in his hand. No, he answered. Nope, I've never heard of any horse doing that time he did tonight. Sun Raider and Cyclone would give him a race, but he'd beat them if he ran. What do you mean if he ran? Asked Henry. Jake nodded toward the black. If he ever got on the same track with those horses, there'd never be any race. That horse would want to fight, not run. He's as wild as they come. Where did you get him, son? He asked. Alec looked at Henry, who nodded. Alec told Jake briefly how he had acquired the black. When he had finished, Jake said, Quite a story, son. Then he turned to Henry. How do you know he's registered anywhere? He asked. You know as well as I do he can't run in any race meetings without being registered. Yeah, I know, Henry answered. We're hoping he's listed in the Arabian stud book. I've been writing to them, but they haven't answered. Guess they can't find anything. Jake looked at the black. That horse has been born wild, Henry. If I'm any judge, you'll never find him registered. I'm afraid if you're right, Jake, Henry said, but you can never tell. Something might come up. We can race him against time and have him break a few records. Then they'll have to notice him. Jake nodded. Not a bad idea. Lots of people would give their right arm to see what I saw tonight. Alec walked the black up and down for a while and then led him into the truck beside Napoleon. After tying the two horses securely, he jumped off the truck and went around to where Henry and Jake were talking. Henry was saying, We won't be around tomorrow night. Give the boy a rest, but we'll make it the following night. Be at the gate by 2 o'clock. Okay, Jake answered. Alec and Henry climbed into the front seat. Jake stood on the running board. Alec glanced at his watch. 3:30, he said as the truck started to roll. Hope my folks haven't missed me. Yeah, murmured Henry, and I hope Mrs. hasn't missed me either, or there'll be plenty of explaining to do when I get home. Jake laughed and struck his white head through the window. So she's still wearing the pants in the household, eh, Henry? No, 'tain't that bad. Henry turned the corner sharply. It's just that she's had enough of horses and she expects me to be through with them, too. Then she still don't know you, does she? Jake grinned. You're like me, Henry, he continued. As long as there's a breath left in your body, you'll want to be around horses and nothing in this world will keep you from them. There was silence until the truck rolled up to the gate. Jake jumped off the running board and opened the gate, and it closed behind them. They waved goodbye to the old man. Well, son, you had a rougher time than either of us expected, didn't you? Henry asked. Guess so, Henry, Alec answered, but I'll be ready for him next time. He relaxed in the seat and let his head fall back on the cushion behind him. Tired? Henry asked. Kinda. Alec tried to hide the weariness in his voice. Even in spite of the nap I took this afternoon, Mother couldn't understand it. Said it was the first time she's seen me in bed during the afternoon since I was 4. Guess you'll have to keep doing that for a while, Alec. I fixed it up with Jake to go over there about 3 nights a week. You see, we have to take advantage of the time we have now before the track opens up for the season. There'll be too many horses and people around then to risk going in. I don't want to let anyone know about the black until he races, that is, except Jake. We can trust him. If he does race, Alec said soberly, we should have had a letter by this time if he's registered at all. You never can tell, Henry answered. They're pretty slow over there, you know, and there's probably a lot of things they have to look up. Yeah, Alex agreed sleepily. He curled his legs underneath him. Anyway, he continued, it's pretty exciting just riding the black like I did tonight on a track. Yeah, and I must say, you and the black did a pretty good job. Made the track record look like it was made by a hobby horse. 15 minutes later, they pulled up in front of the barn. Alec led the black into his stall. Henry stabled Napoleon, then followed Alec into the black stall. Together, the boy and the man rubbed him down. A few minutes later, they left the darkened barn. Good night, Henry, Alec said. See you tomorrow. Night, Alec. The Ramsey house was still dark. Alec opened the door carefully and climbed the stairs to his bedroom. All was quiet except for an occasional snore from his father. Wearily, he undressed and climbed into bed, his body aching. A few hours later, the alarm clamored in his ear. Half consciously, he reached for it and turned it off. A sharp pain in his hand drove all the sleepiness from him. He sat up and looked at the blood-stained handkerchief still wrapped around his hand. He let his head fall back against the pillow, that it hadn't been a dream. He had ridden the black last night. His eyes rested on the chair beside his bed where he had thrown his clothes. Hanging on the arm was his shirt, ripped by the wind. His body still ached all over as he threw the blankets off and climbed out of bed. Quickly he dressed and tucked the torn shirt underneath his arm. He would throw it away before his mother saw it. He went into the bathroom, washed and took care of his cut hands. He clenched his teeth as he poured iodine on his hands, but his head was feverish with excitement. And that ends chapter 13. Wow, what a crazy night. Boy, is Alex dedicated to the black. That's what it takes when you have a horse. You have to be dedicated. Well, I want to thank our pal, Bubba, who threw all kinds of hay all over. Good boy. Yeah, he was a good fella. And I want everybody to stay safe, be kind, get a good night's sleep, and I'll see you tomorrow night.